Yeah, thanks everybody for joining the webinar. And yeah, let's get started with today's session. I think it's best if we start with a round of introductions first. Afterwards, we're going to take a look at record validation, direct validate, of course, and the use cases for that. We're going to take a look at why having good quality data is important into your organizations. Going to have a demo, of course. We're going to show you what we did, and afterwards a Q&A. And approximately this will take around 30 to 45 minutes, including the Q&A. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask the questions via the Zoom control panel. And then we can decide if we want to do it live or just write it out if it's a little bit more technical. So for the introductions, I'm here with Ruben van de Kamp. He's the product owner of Plauti, and he'll be conducting the demo. So Ruben, if you can just say a quick word.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. Good to see so many familiar names. I'll be doing the demo later on, so I'll get back to you.
Great, cool. All right. Yeah, my name is Ogi Babic. I'm the account executive at Plauti, and I'll be doing the sort of the introduction and why data is so important. So for the people who are in the webinar that don't know us yet, Plauti is the company behind duplicate check and record validation. We're a Salesforce ISV partner that develops data quality solutions exclusively for the Salesforce platform. Company was founded in 2011. Around 1,500 clients are signed, and we are highly rated on the App Exchange with a top 20 position on both the apps, duplicate check and record validation. So as mentioned before, company's name is Plauti, and we have two apps, namely duplicate check and record validation. Duplicate check deduplicates data in Salesforce at the point of entry, and RV validates phone, email, and physical addresses. And since a couple of weeks, also at point of entry. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Both of the apps can work standalone, but there are several use cases where they combine very, very nicely and make for a very great combination, which I'll be talking about as well. So kind of to summarize, it's duplicate check for deduplication, record validation for validation. We have a wide range of clients as well, from small local charities up to larger organizations. You probably know some names like Sony, the Brooklyn Nets, Harvard, Johnson & Johnson. But we serve a lot of companies, even if it's a small nonprofit or charity, or even more of an enterprise name. And in today's webinar, we're going to be talking about the importance of having valid data, the benefits of validating at point of entry, and of course a short demo. So yeah, let's kick it off. I wanted to kind of touch upon the subject of data quality first, because it's important to know why having clean data is important. And we believe that data validation is an essential part of any data handling task. And if the data isn't accurate from the start, your results definitely won't be accurate either. So that's why we think it's necessary to verify and validate data before it's used. And one of the rules for having valid data is consistency. So to ensure that correct data integrity, it's important that your data is consistent. Everything that comes in the system should be consistent. And if you're using abbreviations, for example, state codes, this should come back for every field. So kind of to give a more of an example of it, we see sometimes we see that clients are writing the state of New York, for example, like fully spelled, but in other fields, it's written as NY. This is possible, but it's better to kind of pick and choose which field or which format you want to use. So just stick with abbreviations, or just stick with full names, and that's something we could help with. After like consistency comes of course formatting, and this is especially valuable when it comes to the structure of data. Doing so and formatting the data will ensure that you are using the appropriate data model for the formats that are compatible with the application you're using. And a good example of this is there's an application on the App Exchange which sends out text messages to clients, leads, contacts, whatever. and it doesn't always work if phone numbers aren't validated. So that's already the first part. Like if you don't have a correct format of all the phone numbers in your system, like without the country codes, without hyphens, without things that make up a correct phone number, these apps won't really work that well. Same as with reporting, and other marketing and sales departments are also suffering from this, but I'll touch upon that a little bit later. And this automatically brings me, of course, to the topic of wasted resources. According to the study, I think it was by Converter, 35% of lead data submitted on forms is flawed. And a recent study they did as well found that 1 in 4 leads that are processed are invalid because I think they're 30% is due to an incorrect phone number, 27% is down to invalid email addresses, and 28% is because of a fake name or email, like made up stuff, disposable email addresses like Mailinator. And if you don't catch these, it can be a lot of trouble for the organization, which also brings us to the topic of costs. Another research from the company Leadbyte suggests that as many as 65% of leads from cost per lead driven campaigns were also false, proving further that an incorrect or invalid data is a huge problem in the business world. So what it essentially will look like is you're paying $50, £50 a cost per lead, because some of the data is invalid. It actually looks more like $65 or $85 cost per lead, which is of course more if you look at the bigger picture. But of course, time is money, is what they say. And validating all the data manually or asking your reps or your users to validate it just costs way too much time. It's almost impossible to do it if you have a pretty big database. So the things I mentioned about cost directly translate to time as well, because the more time someone spends, the more it will cost eventually. There's a good rule created by this. It's called the 1-10-100 rule. And a good rule of thumb by looking at it is the 1-10-100 rule represents the financial impact of poor data quality and the exponential growth or associated costs that come with that. It's a whole mouthful, but in a nutshell, the $1 or the $1 or €1 can represent how much it costs you to validate data before this data influences any business decision. So there hasn't been anything negatively per se yet. So it's pretty slim. The $10 or €10 is what it costs to correct invalid or improper data after it's infiltrated the business. So it had some effects already, which are to be overseen because it's just $10. But it's 10 times more than 1, of course. Quick maths. But you also have the 100 one. And of course, this is probably what you can tell. This is the amount it costs if you don't even identify or rectify bad data. So you're sending out emails to the wrong persons, to the wrong physical addresses, sending out duplicate information, that sort of stuff. So the goal of this scenario is to kind of demonstrate the exponential increase in financial costs, because it's much cheaper to fix the problem at the beginning, like at point of entry, instead of doing it over here in the $100 mark. And that's a good segue into why we created the new feature we created today, which also brings us to automation. As you probably know, that's why I also joined. Direct Validate is a new feature we built, direct validation, and this will help you with automation and with validating data at point of entry. This is the last study I'm going to mention, but studies have shown that the optimal lead response is 5 minutes or less. So that means if the data that comes in is validated, the sales reps, the marketing teams can pick up the phone straight away and call that prospect or that lead. Whereas if you're working with unvalidated data, you might end up with working with the wrong info. It will take you more time. And this 5 minute stretch will maybe be 10 minutes, 50 minutes, 2 weeks. And this is same for marketing and BI departments as well, because there's no need to validate before running a certain campaign. As soon as the data comes into Salesforce, it's validated. The nurture campaigns can run very good. BI, so business intelligence, don't have to validate all the data before running a report. They know that every second the data that comes in is valid. So it also drastically lowers bounce rates. And we all know what happens if you have high bounce rates. Your what's it called? Your reliability as a sender drops, so it's a higher chance you'll end up with spam. We all know that marketing tools kind of charge you on the amount of emails you have in the system. So if 60% of those emails is garbage, you're paying actually for nothing. So yeah, this also lowers the marketing spend. So enough yapping around from my side. I'm about to give the word to Ruben so he can show you a little bit more of what we built and how you can use it instead of just the words.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Ogi. I try to share my screen. I hope you guys are able to see it. Can you, Ogi?
I can. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, then let's get started. Thank you for giving me the floor. I have the pleasure today to show you how a record validation can work with direct validation at point of entry, like Ogi already mentioned. And about to show you a really practical demo. I'm going to show you how I can set record validation to validate email addresses, home addresses, and phone numbers right at point of entry for basically any way you can create a record automatically in Salesforce. But before I do that, we recently, like a month ago, released a new version of our address component. Like many of you already know, record validation is able to validate emails, addresses, and phone numbers, and we can do that in a batch job, for example, to validate all existing data that's already in Salesforce. We have some great features for end users, like the record validation entry page. And now we have that feature for automation as well, which is really nice. And I think we, by bringing you that last feature, we are really have a complete solution for any way you can create records in Salesforce and have validated records right at the point of entry in the system for your end users to work with. So this new address component, which I really want to show you in the new RV entry component, is behind the new button. Of course, you can create a new lead, which brings you to the record validation entry page. You can override that new button to go to our page instead of the standard entry page of Salesforce. And in this page, I'm able to validate my values when I insert them in Salesforce. So when I'm going to enter Ogi, for example, and currently the preset for the country is set to the Netherlands, and I enter a mobile phone number, then record validation entry will directly validate it. It will format it towards the country that is given, and it will give me some information about the phone number that I have, being the fact that this is a mobile phone number in the Netherlands. So it will give me this information, and it will store this information in Salesforce for me to do something with. Same goes for emails. If I enter Ogi's email address, we're able to validate it right on the spot and give you some information if the email is correct. We even do a check if the addressee part is actually registered at the domain service provider. So right now it's Plauti.com, of course, and I can see that Ogi.babic is really registered and is confirmed as a real user. So if I make a mistake here, for example, then it will give me the information that the email, if I send one there, will actually bounce. So very good information to have in Salesforce, of course. So the last part is this new address component, which we released. We introduced a search address bar in which we can enter a search query. And based on my search query, it will give me some suggestions. So I've entered the Amsterdamse Weg 192, and it will give me some suggestions of actual addresses that are close to my search query. I can take over a suggestion, and record validation will autocomplete the address. It will autocomplete the zip postal code field with the right postal code, a state, province, a country, and the city, and all is written in the official format of that country. And a good thing to know is that we work with almost all countries worldwide, over 200 countries we work with. You can change the country at the top here, and then we can search in the address database of that country. and give you the formatted address of that specific country as well. So this is something we released last month. It's already live in everyone's organizations. And I think it's a great addition for Salesforce and to allocate to your end users. So that was that. Let's talk about direct validate. And to give you an idea on what direct validate actually is, I prepared one slide here because it's in the end it's not that hard to get a grip of. So when you insert records automatically or semi-automatically or manually in Salesforce via, for example, SOAP or the REST API that Salesforce offers, or if you import a lot of records, maybe a list from a trade show you went to and you have a lot of leads that you want to insert in Salesforce, or if you use web forms to insert records into Salesforce, then direct validate can work with those records. So after the record is inserted into Salesforce, direct validate is able to return a status code at point of entry, so it happens within the second, and the status code tells you something about that value. For example, is it a good email address? Is it a bad email address? Or is it a good address or a bad address? Or do we maybe have suggestions for your address? So there are many things that we can say at point of entry about a value. And direct validate, the feature basically is we tell you something about the value that you insert, and we are able to map an action, a follow-up action, to that status code that we return about the value that you've inserted. And an action can be use the validation suggestion that we offer you, or use the original value, or maybe let me take a manual approach here and put it in a job for me to review. We got all these different actions, follow-up actions, which we can link to a status code, which we return at point of entry. And yeah, I'm gonna show you how that works in Salesforce now. So what I'm going to do in the demo, I'm going to firstly insert two records. This record here, and I'm going to use the REST API to insert it. And the first time that I insert it, I'm not going to use direct validate. I'm just going to insert the record and take a look at it in Salesforce. So you see that we've inserted Peter, might be a familiar name to you guys. He's my colleague from sales. And if I go to the detail page and take a look at the values that I've inserted, you can see that I've got an address in Amsterdam. We got a country code, not a fully written out value. We're missing a state province. We're missing a postal code. For the mobile phone number, we don't have a phone number formatted towards the country. There's no country code, and the format is a bit weird. And for the email address, the email address is inserted, but we don't know anything about that email address right now at this stage. So what I can do now, I can configure direct validate. I can do that from the RV setup here. And this is the RV setup, record validation setup. This is where you configure basically anything in the application. And for now, I want to configure direct validate for the lead object, as we're importing leads in the demo. It's good to know that we can work with any objects in Salesforce, also custom objects if you might be using them. And if you look closely, you can see that a new tab is added. It's the fourth tab here, direct validate. Which is new, of course. And if I open it, you can see there are no direct validations. I can add a new direct validation at the top right by clicking the button, which brings up this modal over here, in which I can define a fields. And the fields that I can pick corresponds with the fields that I've configured to work with record validation. Right here at the address, email, and phone tabs, I can map fields to work with record validation. So when record validation comes across that field, and if you, for example, use RV entry, then record validation knows that you want to validate that certain field. So if you want to use fields or field sets with direct validate, please configure them at one of these steps here first. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pick a direct validate for the email field. And for the auto process scenario, I'm going to pick the default email. And to explain you what the auto process scenario does, I'm going to switch back to the PowerPoint slide real quick, because we return to you at point of entry status code. And like I told you in the beginning, we can map a follow-up action to any status codes that we return. And the auto process that we apply here corresponds with the actions that you map to a certain status code. But in a second, I will show you that in action. What it comes down to, basically, for every validate action, we can map auto process actions basically uniquely. So for every different direct validate, you can link a certain list of actions that are specific to that channel that a record is inserted. So that it's pretty flexible that way. I've lost my mouse. Oh, there it is. As a last step, I have to apply it to a certain channel that I want to use the direct validate in. We offer 4 channels: the SOAP and REST API, the Salesforce SOAP and REST API. The bulk upload, which corresponds with any way of importing or bulk inserting records into Salesforce. For example, data loader, and many people use the data loader tool, or the import wizard that Salesforce offers, or the web to lead. So if you use the web to lead feature in Salesforce to insert leads or any other kind of records to Salesforce, then we can validate them right at point of entry. Via the tool that I'm using the REST API currently. So I'm going to configure the email direct validate for the REST API channel. That's basically all there is to it. That's it. So I'm going to do that for the mobile phone. We've got the default phone scenario, which links phone actions to status codes. I'm going to apply that to the REST API as well. I'm going to do the same thing for the address, default address, and I'm going to apply it to the REST API inserts. So now I've basically configured direct validate for any records that are inserted via the REST API. So if we go back to Postman, we can see the Peter record again. I'm going to change the first name to Peter2, so we can see it in Salesforce later on. So what we have here, we get the same record here with the same email address, same phone number, and the same street. And I'm going to hit the send button again. And Salesforce responds that that it succeeded. We got a record ID, so we can go back to Salesforce. I'm going to open up the lead list in a new tab. And one thing I immediately notice, because we got the Peter2 here, you can see that there is a state province added to the record. If we go back to the call, we can see that I didn't insert a state or a province. So you can see that record validation immediately did its thing. Now, if I enter the record here, you can see in the record validation live components, which you can decide to add to your page layout. It's not mandatory, but it's optional, that we were able to validate and verify the streets or the addresses, the mobile phone and the email, the things that we configure with record validation. And if I go to the details tab to see the page layout, you can see that we got a nice full address. We've got a state province, we got a postal code, and we got a nice verification. It's an existing address in the Netherlands. We got the confirmation about that. If we go to the mobile phone, you can see that it immediately and automatically validated towards the country, the Netherlands. So you can see the country code at the beginning, and the phone number is formatted into the format that is given. At the phone type, we can see that we're dealing with a fixed line. It's optional to store something that we have to say about the value in a custom field. So the phone type is a custom field. I've decided to store the phone type in that field so I can maybe report on it later on. Same goes for the phone status code. So this is the status codes that we return, and the status code is 100, which means that it's a correct phone number, and the phone type is a fixed line. Later on, I will tell you more about those status codes and how we can link those actions to it. So keep that in mind. And about the email address here, peter.zansa@plauti.com, you can see that the email is correct and confirmed as a real user. So the registrant part is actually registered at the domain service provider. Also for the email, we have a status code 312, and for the address, we store a status code as well. And by storing these status codes, you can later query on them, you can run reports, you can, for example, bring up all the email addresses that are going to bounce, for example, maybe delete them or maybe change them or maybe do with it whatever you want. So storing these status codes in a custom field, which relates to the value that you've mapped them with, is a really good thing to do, basically. To tell you and show you something more about those status codes and how we can link actions to them, I'm going to switch back to the setup. And you can see that for email, mobile, and phone, we've mapped these auto process scenarios. So I'm going to start with the email one here. So I'm going to the auto process tab in the left side menu. If I go to the email tab here, then I can see here the status codes or the potential status codes that record validation is able to return to you when we validate an email address. And we just saw 312, which is the status code, which is pretty good. It's the email is correct and confirmed as a real user. That's like the thing that you want to see, of course. Based on the status codes and the description, we can link an action. So we can do that for any status codes that record validation is able to return to you. So in the case of the email is correct and confirmed as a real user, I, of course, want to keep the original value in Salesforce. So I basically don't want to do anything with that email address. But what record validation did do is store the status code 312 in the record, so I can know that it's a correct email address, and I can use it in reports or in my marketing campaigns to only include emails that have a 312 status code. What I can do, but it's all optional, of course, if an email is incorrect or if an email will bounce, for example, if we can verify that it will bounce, we can, for example, choose to remove the original value from Salesforce. That's something that we've seen some use cases of people wanting to do this. So it's optional, it's something that we offer. And just to show you how that would work, I've now applied to 350 and 352. If I do the call again for Peter 3, and if I do a double A in Peter Zandstra, then this email is going to bounce if I send something to it. But the format is correct, of course. So the record is inserted. Go back to the lead list in the second tab. So you can see Peter 3. And you can see that it is verified as invalid and it will bounce, but it didn't. But that is because I didn't hit the save button probably. Yeah. So let me do that again quickly. Always save new configurations. So we are going to insert Peter 4. And now you will see that the email field is empty because I gave the assignment to empty the email field if the email value will bounce. So that's optional. Another thing that's optional, if we go to the address action list, if I open it up, default address, for addresses, record validation is able to verify it, it is able to validate it. And if you have a perfect address or a nearly perfect address, we can return to you any of these status codes here in the 500s. And in that case, if there is only one suggestion, and most of the times we have a really nice improved verified address that's in the official format of your country, for example, then you can pick the action to use the validation. So use the suggestion that we have to give you a better address than the one that you're inserting. But if you have multiple suggestions, so for example, if record validation is not able to pinpoint your input to one specific address, but that there are options, for example, then you can say, okay, I want to take a look at this manually because there is a choice here. I don't want to automate this because there is a choice, and then skip it for manual processing. So as a use case, if I go back to the Postman call here, and if I, for example, remove the house number from the street here, then record validation has no way of pinpointing this to one specific address, because now we're inputting a street. So right now, my configuration tells me that there are going to be multiple suggestions, and I want to skip this for manual processing. Well, let's see how that works. Let me save this one. Oh, my mouse is gone again. That's so really weird. Oh, there it is. So saving this config, and I'm going to do the call. So we don't have a specific address here. So right now, record validation doesn't pinpoint it to a specific address. It gives me the option to manually take a look at it, and I can do that at the RV job page. So whenever there is linked an action that you want to take the manual approach, you want to store it for manual review, then you can go to the RV job page here. RV will make one job a day with the validations that you want to take a manual look at. You can enter Beta 4 here, and then you can see that we got all these suggestions because there are a lot of addresses on the Javaplein in Amsterdam. I was looking for Javaplein 2 so I can pick the right suggestion. You'll see that it's completing the address in the official format of the address database in the Netherlands, and I can save it. Yeah, that way I've taken a look at the menu approach here. So yeah, pretty cool stuff. So we've now seen it for REST API. We can do this for SOAP API as well, but also for imports. And it's really cool to see that in action. So let me show you how that would work. And it's really easy. If I go to the setup and to the lead object, for this part of the demo, I'm going to import a CSV file. What I can do is go to the Direct Validate tab, and I'm going to edit the 3 direct validations that I have. I'm going to apply it to bulk upload as well. And I'm going to do that for all 3. And that's basically all there is to it. So I can now import a CSV file, and record validation will validate email addresses, phone numbers, and addresses for the records that I import. It's that easy. So if I go to the import wizard of Salesforce, if I'm going to launch the wizard here, probably familiar with the import process. I'm going to import leads. I'm going to add them as new records. And I've prepared a nice CSV file here. Let me open it up to show you what I'm importing. I'm going to import these 4 records, Ogie, Ruben, Stan, and John. You can see that I've got 2 mobile phone numbers here at the top. The 3rd mobile phone number is inaccurate. And we've got an American number as well. We got a bunch of email addresses, so let's see which of them are okay. For Ogie, we've got only a house number in the street field. We don't have a city. We do have a postal code, no province, and a country. Then we got street and no postal code and no house number, so no way to pinpoint this to a specific address. So it will give me a suggestion on the RV job page. And then we got Stan with an address in Arnhem without a province and postal code. And we got the Public Library of New York, just to show you that we can work with any address worldwide. It doesn't matter also in your CSV if you have 100 different addresses coming from 100 different countries, we're able to work with them. So I went on to the next page. This is the place where you map the fields, and I'm going to import. So yeah, Direct Validate is set to recognize imports and is set to directly validate the emails, the phone numbers, and the addresses. So let me see if it worked, and I'm going to open the lead list again. So let's open, for example, the Public Library of New York one. You can see that the carrot address is verified up to house number level, and we got a correct phone number. And if we take a look at the details here, you can see that we've got a nice validated completed address here. We got an address status code, which we can do something with. We don't have an email anymore, and that's because the email address that I've entered will bounce, and we just configured that emails that will bounce should not be in Salesforce, so it's no longer there. And for the phone number that was inserted, we've got a fixed line or mobile phone. I was not able to entirely recognize that with a phone status code, which we can use in reporting. If we take a look at Ogi, for example, remember that Ogi only had a house number in the street address field and a postal code, and now we got a full address here, and so it's completed. So we only need a postal code and a house number to get a specific address back in the call that we do. We got a mobile phone number nicely formatted. Well, I guess you guys get the hang of it, that it works for imports as well. Really nice. If we compare the CSV file now with the records in Salesforce, you can see that we've filled up all the fields that were missing initially. So without any user interaction, we have that nice validated records in there. Just for the sake of argument, let me see that it works. Let me show you that it works for Web2Leads as well. Before we head on to a Q&A maybe. So I don't know if there are any questions already. If you do have a question, then now is the time to put them in the Q&A control panel of the Zoom box. So I did it for Web2Leads, and I've got a really beautifully designed Web2Lead form here. There it is. So let me enter Stan. And this form only validates the email address because I don't have the address fields, but that's an option as well. So if I now go to the lead list, then right at point of entry and right after that the record is inserted, we already know that the email is correct and confirmed as a real user. So you can directly take action on this lead, email it, start a marketing campaign. Well, Ogi told you everything about the value of this feature. I think it's really cool. That's what I wanted to show you today. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them. And for that, let me go back to Ogi.
Yes, find the right screen. There it is. Yeah, there are a couple questions. So let me think. Let me see which one. There is one on CPU limits, Ruben. I'm not sure if you've seen it. The impact on CPU limits and impact on current triggers, flows, processes, like overall performance. Do you know if there's an impact on that? You're on mute. You're still, yeah.
Yeah,
there you go.
yeah. That old mute button is really annoying. Basically, when we do an import or when we do a REST call and a record inserted into Salesforce, then an Apex job is created and is able to kick off the validation process. So basically, we don't run into limits here. We can work with a large influx of data at the same time, and record validation able to validate everything without running into these limits. So no problems there. No.
Second question, can we direct validate fields and records that are inserted directly in Salesforce from a Visual Force page?
Yeah, that's optional as well. So besides direct validate, we offer flows, for example, flow actions. So what you can do on a record insert, for example, is directly validate records that are inserted via Visual Force page or via any other integration that you have or that you built yourself. Besides that, we have an Apex API available and a REST API available. So direct validate is not necessarily the tool to go to in such a case, preferably. but the REST API is able to help you there. If you go to the support website, support.recordvalidation.com, we have a nice article on how to implement those kind of tools into your own integrations.
Cool. Question from Chris. He said, I believe Ruben covered this, but can you confirm there's a view or report end users can access that will provide our records with bad email address, phone number, etc.? Yeah, this can be done. It will create an RV job for you to review with fields that are invalid or already have to make suggestions, like with an Amber code. So yeah, there is definitely something like that. I think you can see the questions as well, Ruben. So if you find one that's interesting to answer, there are a lot of them.
Yeah, I see a question from Matthew. Can the phone number be validated without showing the country codes? So yeah, that's definitely possible. When you go to the RV setup, we're able to select or to configure what kind of format you want to use for phone numbers. So I'm here in the RV setup and the lead object. We have a phone tab over here, and we got the 3 phone fields that I'm using with record validation. I can edit the configuration and I can change the format. Currently, we're set to using the E164 format, but we can choose a national format as well, which doesn't include country codes. So I hope that answered your question.
Cool. Does direct validate from Metro as well work with part-out forms instead of web to lead?
Yeah, that's possible as well. So everything that's inserted into Salesforce, yeah, we can use and we can work with. So any integration, everything that kicks in records in Salesforce, we can take up, validate, and at point of entry give you the validated records. That's no issue for us.
Okay, and I had this is an interesting one. I'm not sure if this is possible, but in India, there are, for example, addresses that are split between fields 1, 2, and 3. Can we validate this? So the 3 addresses split into different lines because the name is so long.
Right, so most probably we're able to do that. We do support Indian addresses. For this specific use case, most likely we're able to do that probably by shifting everything in one field if it's possible, maybe in a field that allows a longer character limit. But yeah, to find out, and if you can't work it out, feel free to send us an email and we can work with you to make it happen in your org for those addresses. Pretty positive that we're able to do so.
Got it. And there's a question from Sylvie. She said it's fine when the address only contains one field for the street, but when it contains more details, the tool seems to ignore this, which can lead to email not being delivered. So what do you suggest for that? It's a pretty constructive question, so that's why I asked it as well.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not entirely sure about this specific use case, but then again, if you can send us an email about if you run into those kind of issues, we'd be happy to take a look at them and work with you on resolving it. But I don't have enough information to know what's going on over there at the moment. But feel free to send us an email and we can work it out.
Great. Can we show results in the visual force page before inserting the record? I'm not sure.
Yeah, of course, we have an Apex API available, and you can use our Apex API to do validations underwater on the front end, on the back end. It doesn't really matter. So if you want to use our Apex API and develop that yourself, then that's definitely a possibility with our Apex API.
Got it. And AL says, I don't see RV setup in our org. Is it part of duplicate check? No, it's a different product. So it's called record validation. You can download it from the App Exchange. And then you'll see RV setup. Yeah, I think that's about it.
Yeah, there was a question from Matthew. Does this feature break the inline editing in the record page?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so good thing to know there that if you override the edit button in Salesforce, and then I'm referring to this edit button over here, to go to RV entry, for example, which we recommend people to do, then Salesforce doesn't allow you to do the inline editing anymore, as you can see. We're not really happy with that, but there's nothing we can do about that via this way. We do have a workaround for this. The workaround is by creating a new edit button and by using our URL addressable feature to open up RV entry with all the values of this record. It's really easy to implement. I believe we even have a support article for that. It's a great workaround. I will send the article to you, Matthew, if you leave your email address, and we can make it happen, or maybe we can find you in our database.
Yep.
I guess this is it, right? Okay.
Yeah, it looks like it. There are no new questions anymore. Yeah, no, right on time. Yeah, next steps, of course, we'd love to hear from you. So the clients who don't use RV yet, feel free to schedule a call with our data experts, plauti.com/demo. You can start a trial for duplicate check, of course, but you can also start a trial for record validation. You get some testing credits to start testing the application. And then there's some handy links in the end. So yeah, thanks for being here. And if you're interested in learning more, as I said, book a one-on-one call with one of our experts, and then yeah, we can continue the conversation. All right, thanks, and yeah, maybe see you another call.